On1 Photo RAW 2019. Is it worth the price? I've just returned from quite a long overseas trip, and whilst I was away, On1 released the new version of Photo RAW, which is their editing software. Now, before I left, I prepaid for an upgrade, and now I'm back, I want to see if the upgrade was worth it. I should probably tell you to start with that I am actually a long-term user of On1 software. Their marketing plays a lot on the fact that people don't like the new Adobe rental model, and in recent years they've been promoting their software as being a purchase. The thing is, every year they've asked me for an upgrade fee, and it's actually getting to feel a lot like I'm actually renting the software from them. The only difference is that if I don't buy the upgrade, I still get to use the software. So, what's new? If I look at the website, I can see a page here with what's new. And if I scroll down the list, it actually looks like there's quite a lengthy list of new things. But are they really new? The first two enhancements on the list are really about the editing workflow, and it doesn't surprise me because the thing is, On1 seem to change the interface and tweak the workflow in every version. In all honesty, I'm actually finding it a bit confusing. Next on the list, we've actually got the Lightroom photo setting migration. I've got a lot of time and effort invested in Lightroom, and I'm not moving away from it anytime soon. But if you are looking for an alternative, that might be something that's actually very valuable, and I'm going to look at that in another video. Moving down the list, we've got a text tool. That's not going to be any use to me. Now, scrolling down the list, there's a number of other features that they've actually introduced. But the one that really interests me, and the one that I usually look for in upgrades, are what the new filter options are. The other one that's caught my attention, though, is also this improved local adjustments. In the old On1, when you did local adjustments, you were working on an image. Now the local adjustments are applied at a raw level, so that should lead to improved quality and also more flexibility in the editing. In this video, I'm going to look at focusing in on some of these features, which are the interface, the workflow, and also the filters. So let's switch now to On1. And the RAW file that I've chosen is this one, which is from a Nikon D800. So that should test the performance of the software. In the past, I've actually found the On1 Photo RAW software a bit sluggish, and it almost has to catch up with itself quite frequently. If I see the screen becoming sluggish, I know perhaps there are some performance issues still in there. If I look over onto the right side of the screen, I've got the links to edit, and down here I've got some other features that you may want to use. Now, previously what you had down here was all the different modules within On1 Photo Suite that you could access, so things like develop, local adjustments, and you would have to come out of one module to go into another. Now that's been moved away, so let's have a look at how that works if we actually select to edit our image. So immediately it's rendered that very quickly indeed, which previously that wouldn't have happened. I can also see that I have access to the different modules here now, develop, effects, portrait and local, just by clicking on one of these tabs. And that's actually a lot simpler than it used to be. I'm going to start by using the develop module, which is all about converting the RAW file into a corrected base image. Now, the first thing I notice are the profiles here, and there's a number of different ones that appear to be in there as On1. I'm going to use the On1 standard, but also the RAW file has some other profiles from the camera manufacturer there, which it's also picking up on. So let's make some adjustments here. And all I'm trying to do here is create quite a nice base image, which we'll then work on later. So we'll add in a bit of warmth there, because this was actually shot late on in the afternoon, in the early evening. I'll add just a little bit of saturation and vibrance at this stage, and that appears quite good. If I come down here, I can actually zoom in now on the image, so let's just have a look at 100% magnification. And we'll start to add in a little bit of sharpening there. If you're not familiar with On1, it's actually got a very good RAW converter in there. And in this case, it seems to have created quite a clean image. The highlights and the shadows have been pulled back quite well. And although we could do more to recover the highlights, I'm trying to keep this looking natural in terms of the sunburst that's coming through the clouds there. The other thing that we've got down here are the lens corrections. So if I turn that off, you can see there the change to the edge of the frame. I actually like the lens correction off with the wide angle shot, so I'm going to turn that off at the moment. And that looks like sufficient to start with as a base image. Now let's do a local adjustment, and what we'll do is we'll change the sky. So I'll just use this masking bug, and straight away we've got a selection there on the sky, and we've got quite a lot of control over that. And you can even change the temperature as well of the sky in comparison to the rest of the image, and we can adjust the saturation and tint as well. So in terms of local adjustments, it's quite easy. If you wanted to create further adjustments, you can simply add more adjustments in there, and then this one is just like the others where I could make some further changes. So we'll just move that down, and I will paint in on the rocks an adjustment there, and there, and there, and also on this heather and here. Now what I'm doing here now is, although that looks dark, I'm now going to actually lighten it up. I'm going to use it to add in a little bit more lightness there, and a little bit of structure as well. And that's really just to bring out the texture in the rock, and also on this heather here. And we'll add in, a little bit of, let's reset that, and then a little bit of saturation. And then I'm going to add a further adjustment, and this time I'm going to use it to just darken down the heather here. And a little bit around the shadow there, just so our eye isn't drawn to it quite so much. Okay, so that looks like a good starting position in terms of the image. So there was the original, there's the adjusted image. Now using the interface feels a lot easier and cleaner than it did previously. So let's now drop over to the effects. Now with the effects adjustment, you could use presets before, and those are still here, and they're actually quite usefully categorized, but they feel a little bit easier now in terms of how you can get at them. And also you can choose now individual filters, where we have a list of filters here, and then within the filters, so if we go back to that vignette, you can see the effects of the adjustment settings. So we've got presets within each of the filters that you can actually choose. So for example, we could choose a big softy vignette, and it's added the filter over here. So I'm just going to remove that. The other way to add a filter is through this new dialog here, and this actually appears quite useful. We seem to have a few new filters in there, and I'll look at those in a moment. And we've got this new search option. Now the search option seems like a good idea. So for example, if I simply type in blur, you can see anything that's to do with blur. in reality, I'm not sure how useful that is. The other thing that you will find useful though is this nice browser here. So if I now pick out a, say, glow filter, it tells me that the glow adds a soft focus to your photo. You can see there it's got the keywords blur, creative, autumn, soft focus, and it's also got a preview just to show you what the image would look like. So you've now got two ways to add these filters, and rather than having to know what the filters do, you've got hints and tips there that help you actually understand this. So from a new user's perspective, that's actually very useful. I'm going to add a color adjustment filter. Now this is one of the new filters. Now as soon as I added it, I immediately recognized it. It's part of another filter. If I look at the color enhancer, you can see there the similarity. All that's happened is that they've removed this middle section here of the filter and they've simplified it. Now, they've actually added a number of new filters in this latest version, but all of them are actually parts of other filters that already existed. So for me, I'm sorry, but there are no new adjustment filters in here. And that, I think, is quite a disappointment. Let's get on and let's adjust our image. So the first thing I'm going to do is add in a fall adjustment there, and that's just the preset. And I think I'll move the sliders just a little bit further. And then next, I'm going to add in a tone enhancer. Now as I'm doing that, I'm making these adjustments, you can see that they are affecting the entire image. Now I don't want that. In terms of the tone enhancer, I just want to affect the foreground elements of the rocks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one of the masks. Now there's been no changes to the masks in Photo RAW at the moment, but they are promising some new AI or artificial intelligence masks in the future. The masking tools are though in On1 excellent. They're some of the best I've seen. So let's now just use them. So I'll invert the adjustment mask here. I'm now going to paint in my adjustment, and I've got my opacity set at about 30% now. So I can just paint in on the areas where I actually want that adjustment to take place. So I'm using it to draw attention to these rocks in the foreground and also to this heather, or the flowers on the heather, to make them stand out. And we'll do the same on this rock as well. So you can see here the mask, or you can go back to the original, and we can just feather that mask a little bit to help blend the adjustments. And there you can see the difference that makes. It's only a subtle adjustment, but it's quite useful. Again, if we come down to the colour adjustment, we can now add another mask, and I'm going to use a luminosity mask this time, and I'm going to invert it, and that is to add the adjustment to these rocks. Now immediately at this point I'm actually find that I'm missing something that I wanted that was in the colour enhancer, which is the colour temperature. So now I'm going to have to add another colour enhancer filter. And now I can increase the temperature, which is what I wanted to do with the rocks, and also add to the saturation. Okay, I'm now a little bit more satisfied with that. I'm just going to add a couple of other filters now. So I've got one of my favourites, which is the glow filter. And that's put the filter in the wrong place. So I'm going to just reorder the filters now. and I've got a problem here where it's not scrolling, so I just need to scroll down so that I can move the filter up and drop it at the top. And now I'm going to add in some of the adjustment, and I'm going to go for strong soft light. But I don't want that filter everywhere. So again, I'm going to use a mask. I'm going to start with a luminosity mask. And we'll view that. And what I want to do is have the glow effect in the sky, in the background, and on some of these rocks here. So I can adjust my mask now using the levels. Let's actually invert that for the moment. And that gives me a sort of starting position. We'll go back to the view. And now I'm going to paint out the effect in certain areas. And I'm also going to paint it in others. And we'll just increase the strength of that now in the halo. And that's created the effect I was looking for. And finally, we'll add a vignette. And I'm going to start with the Big Softy vignette. Now, what we've now got in the Big Softy, or in fact any of the vignettes, is this new drop down. And I've got a priority mode. Now, what that does is it actually allows me to set the priority to be the highlights. So it won't apply the filter as much in the highlights. And now I can just adjust the vignette there. So that's now looking a lot more natural in terms of the photograph. Now the opacity, the glow here is just a little bit too strong at the moment, so I'm just going to reduce the opacity of that glow filter down to something that I prefer. Now that's looking quite good overall. Let's just compare it against the preview. Well, there's the original, and there's the adjustment, and I'm sure you'll agree that's quite a big change, and it's actually been able to create it very easily and quickly. So, to the big question then, was it worth the price of the upgrade? Well, for me, yes, I think it was, but it's not clear cut. I really like the changes to the interface and the workflow. It's definitely simplified the application, it's made it easier to use, but it's also made it much more powerful. You're now editing in local adjustments on RAW files, and if I added further layers to this image, I can actually again use RAW files, and I'll just show you. So if I add a new layer, what I actually do is I go back to looking at all my RAW files. So if you're into exposure blending and things like that, you can layer up multiple versions of your image with RAW files. And that actually has an enormous amount of power, and something that isn't really intuitive in a lot of other programs, or in some it's just impossible to achieve. Now what the new version lacks is actually new tools and new filters, and to be honest, that's what people expect and pay for with upgrades, and certainly I expected to see something new in there. It almost feels as though the On1 team has run out of ideas. Now, if you don't already own On1 and you're thinking of purchasing it, I'll be honest, I think this is an absolutely brilliant editing package, and the masking tools are absolutely exceptional. They make working with your images very, very easy and intuitive. If you're an existing Photo RAW 2018 user and you're considering an upgrade, I would honestly recommend that you check carefully. You need to answer the question for yourself, are you really going to benefit from these changes? I like the new interface and I can work faster in this, so for me that in itself is value for money. But you may not agree, it may not suit your needs, so check carefully. I'm Whalley, you've been watching Lenscraft. I'll see you next week for another video.